All right, hey everyone. Back for another matchup review VOD. This time I'm going to do, not sure how much of a widespread interest this is going to be since it's not two decks, but we're going to cover the mirror, the depths mirror today. I'm joined by a very special guest. You guys may know him as a GP Hartford finalist. You may know him as a judge. You may know him as a streamer or on Twitch's Expedition Map. You may have listened to his podcast, which is very conveniently titled the Dark Depths Podcast for this particular VOD. So I'm with Mike Mapson today. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Not too bad. Couldn't think of anyone else I'd rather cover these mirrors. I know we've had a lot of discussions on this deck, in particular over the last month or so, and we have a little bit of some variations between the lists. And nicely enough, the match we're going to cover is the two versions of Rainbow Depths against each other. So I think I've done enough videos where I don't really have to dig into the Elvish Reclaimer, the Singleton one of Reclaimer version. So for the list that you've been running, basically the main differences are trimming a little bit of acceleration in the Spirit Guide, even though the Once Upon Times that are added kind of like make up for that anyway. But the cards that are less is the one you're trimming a Spirit Guide, you're trimming a Sylvan Scrying, and blanking on what the third is.
The Reclaimer.
And the Reclaimer, the Scrying, and a Spirit Guide for 3 Once Upon a Times, and then you're trimming a Gemstone Mine for this City of Brass. Do you mind going over like your rationality or your thoughts on why Once Upon a Time might be a better fit?
So to be completely fair and transparent, I guess, I originally copied this list from somebody who won a challenge. But the Once Upon a Times have been really good for me. One of the issues that I personally have with Turbo Depths and why I've always kind of historically preferred Slow Depths is I think one of the hardest parts about the deck is deciding if an opening hand is good enough. Actually, listening to you talk about the deck helps me a lot with my keeping and mulliganing hands. But I think a lot of the opening hands kind of just don't look like they do anything, or they're not quite smooth enough. And Once Upon a Time, I think it makes more hands keepable. So I've been really happy with that. Having so many Spirit Guides, there's a lot of times where my hand just gets pumped up with all this mana and I don't really have a need for it. So even late game, being able to draw the Once Upon a Time, it's not necessarily as great as drawing a Sylvan Scrying in the late game, but it's still been pretty functional for me. Casting it at instant speed has actually been relevant multiple times, even just dodging Force of Negation. I might go back to the 4th Gemstone Mine over the City of Brass, though. City of Brass has made me lose a match now, and I'm really mad about it. And Gemstone Mine, I don't think has ever cost me a match. So,
yeah, you do run into some issues where you'll occasionally get a double mine draw, and then a stage or something, and you have to curve or you have a discard spell and a stifle, and you have to curve that into a tutor, and then on a tutor turn, say if the crop rotation's your tutor, you're kind of going more all in because you're losing all your lands instead of being left over with one additional land post combo at times. So it comes up where it's kind of all in, but yeah, I haven't been losing matches because of the mines. It just makes you just have to be a little bit more considerate of it. But yeah, the damage isn't really an aggro format anymore, so the damage doesn't come up a ton. But there are lists that pressure you enough where once you start to get into that 6 pain land range, you're kind of tempting fate a little bit.
yeah.
Against the Delver Shells and stuff, they're not completely incapable of pressuring you. So it's just one of those things where I've found the mine to be pretty solid. So yeah, I think that would probably be a good change. I think the Once Upon a Time's interesting. I don't have enough reps with it. Every time I've tried it, I lose games because of it. And it's infuriating. Like, I look at it and I was like, well, I would have this game-winning line to go get Sajiri Step or whatever I need if this was just a Sylvan Scrying. And, like, that's my mindset. And I haven't been able to get over that hump to, like, I don't know. I probably should give it, like, 50 to 100 matches of testing to really, really come to some kind of conclusion. But
Yeah, I think it's only really bit me in the butt once ever that it wasn't Sylvan's Crying. So to me, that's worth it considering how much more I keep opening hands now that it's in the deck.
okay. Yeah, so I'll have to give it another, give it a fourth run through, just to make sure that I haven't been on the wrong side of some small sample size variants. So I could see myself getting to a point where I'd still want the fourth hard tutor, but maybe I would run like 2 and like shave a Spirit Guide. The Reclaimer is like such a hard cut though, because when it's good, it just dominates. Like, I feel like I've had a couple matches in the last week against like things like Sneak and Show where it just hits the table on 1 and then goes and gets Caracas and then goes and gets the combo, and it like just totally completely takes over the game and it enables all of your other disruption to really punish people. I mean, that's not always the case. It does turn on removal against things like Delver, where their bolts that were previously just going at your face are now completely alive. So, you know, it has its hits and misses, but I feel like the hits have been good enough that I still like it, but it's definitely something I'm going to test again in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Reclaimer is kind of insane when it works. I just feel like with so much Delver in the meta right now, like there's so much Lightning Bolt, there's so much Swords, like it just never seems to survive for me anymore. I liked it a lot more when I had a bunch of creatures, so I was kind of overloading their removal, like with Elvish Reclaimers and Dark Confidants, but now that it's really just like they have the one creature to hit, it just never seems to stick around for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. The bolts are the bigger issue in my mind. Like, if someone's pointing a Swords to Plowshares at my Reclaimer, that generally makes me happy because the Reclaimer essentially just played the role of duress. So, or something like that. That's one less like serious problem that you have to win through, and the Plow didn't hit your Lodge, and it turns on your Surgicals, and you know, a lot of other things in certain matchups. So that one I'm not as concerned about. The Bolt one is the bigger issue. Like when you're in the dark and you keep a hand that's like reliant on, say, like a single discard spell and a Reclaimer to go get the pieces, and you get the discard spell dazed, or the discard spell resolves and they have like a Bolt and an Arcanist, and you're just like those are the games that are the bigger issues. But yeah, as a one of, it doesn't come up a ton, so it's hard to say, but I think it's definitely something that needs to be looked into in both directions. I mean, this deck's only been around for 6 or 7 weeks, so I don't expect that anyone's close to what the best 75 is, like a stock version or something like that.
Yeah. It might be too deep, but if you really wanted to play it, you could also just like jam 1 in the sideboard, bring it in after the removal's gone.
Interesting. Yeah, the sideboard stuff is so the space is so tight. Like, I am already down like to an uncomfortable, like, it's really not perfect not having the second Force of Vigor. Like, I think ideally you want 4 removal spells for all the random nonsense, from Ensnaring Bridge off of Karn to Needles out of the Green Post list to just against the Echoers, a deck it's just good in general, and against Tia. Like, it's really good, and I'm already down to 3 on that front just because I want 3 extra pieces of like dedicated Swords to Plowshares, Caracas, Answers, 2 to 3 Safekeepers, and the Graveyard Hate is like functionally split against the combo decks and the control decks, and that's really good, and the Flusterstorms have been amazing. And I know I've seen people cut the Caracas, but I am not a fan of not playing with Caracas.
Yeah, I think they're crazy.
Yeah, I've seen since JPA went on a couple of runs this last weekend, I've already seen a significant spike in Sneak and Show pilots back in the leagues. So I don't, and the mirror is kind of increasing a little bit. Like, lands has been around as constant. Like I don't know, even against just like the Thalia decks. And yeah.
It's funny to me that you say the mirror is increasing because, like, I feel like I played against it more a couple weeks ago than I do now. Like when you first started playing this deck, it just felt like everybody was copying. And now I think some people are like, "Well, I can't win with it, so moving on to other things."
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Depths is like an over the top complicated strategy, but I think it's almost like learning accounting like in school where like some people just it just makes sense and they think it's the easiest thing ever, and then for other people it's like learning a foreign language, and
Yeah.
it's just like one of those things. But you know, I try to put out some content to help some people when we can.
Yeah, I think part of it is people like understand the general baseline strategy and like they know like okay, this is how I make like a Mirror Age, but they can't necessarily figure out what the best way to protect it is. Like they can't like navigate the small details, like figure out how do I beat a Wasteland and a Caracas, you know?
Yeah, and yeah, that's fair because a lot of the harder matchups, it's not just one thing. Like if it was just like before, say like 2 3 years ago against Delver, it used to just be like legitimately the second you could combo, you combo, like main phase, whatever. The second they give you a window to make a 2020, you make a 2020 because they just couldn't answer it. Like there was no there was no Oko, there was no Brazen Borrower, they weren't running main deck bounce spells. Like it was just beat Wasteland. And now it's like you have to beat Wasteland, but they could also Delver block into Oko. Um, they could also just do a bunch of different things. They could have Brazen Borrower. The D&T lists have obviously a variety of answers that you need to play around. So do decks like Espervile and Maverick and Lands. Like it's not just beat one card, not just beat Swords to Plowshares or beat Wasteland. It's yeah, you have to navigate like sometimes 6 or 7 different things that could happen in a matchup, and that's where it gets tricky.
Definitely agree.
All right, so speaking of tricky, let's jump into an actual match of the mirror. So probably be leaning on what you think you would do in some of these spots a little bit heavier because obviously I already played these matches and made the decisions in live time and had to live with them. So basically,
Then when I say the wrong thing, I'm going to look bad.
No, I think that would be what makes it worthwhile, right? Like you talk out like the initial thought, and then if we have differing thoughts, then that's probably like a great learning tool for people. Like obviously, I know you're being put on the spot, so anything that goes in the opposite directions, it's not really any different than making like a slight misstep in a game. And I'll tell a story so that if that does come up, you'll feel a lot better about it. So I had a really long win streak going into this week on Magic Online, and I lost the game 3 of Maverick where I stalled. This must have been like turn 12 or something. I stalled and I played around Assassin's Trophy and tapped out a couple of times to try and get it out of their hand, and eventually did, and then resolved a discard spell, and they had 2 plows, and so I took 1 and didn't have an answer. So I literally stalled for as long as I could until I was at 1 life. I was holding a Stifle for their fetch, and they only had a Thalia on board, and I drew on the last possible turn, I drew a Not of This World. And I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna win this game. And at the end of my turn, they just fetched, and I just clicked through it without thinking, and they got Dryad Arbor and attacked with the 2 creatures, and the Dryad Arbor killed me when when I navigated this game. And I was like, oh, I played so well for like 12 turns, played around everything they could possibly have, and then I just didn't stifle their fetch land and died because I couldn't block both of their creatures, and the 1/1 Dryad Arbor killed me. Yeah. so yeah, we all have our moments. So what do you think of this hand?
I don't love this hand personally. Like, I think a lot of people would argue that it's pretty close, but I just think that we can do better on a 6. Like, you don't have either half of the combo. You can find one, and you do have protection, so like it's certainly not bad. And I wouldn't fault somebody for keeping this, but I don't think I would keep it.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think to keep a 7, you have to have a very specific reason for keeping it. So I want to have either a direct path, ideally a direct path to the combo and some piece of disruption, but at least like a direct path to the combo. And in this case, this hand does not have a direct path to the combo, and it doesn't really even have direct disruption. It's like the needle and the not of this world are sort of disruption, but if we're against any kind of deck, like I didn't know this person was on depths. If we're against any kind of deck that is performing, spell-based combo or just really any, like we're just not doing anything. They're more or less just goldfishing us. So, and we don't really even have a plan yet. So yeah, I shipped this hand. That calculation changes like as you go down in cards, but for a 7, that's generally how I approach it.
I think I would keep the 6. I have the feeling you did not, but I think I would keep it.
So normally I would not, and I honestly don't remember what I was thinking at the time, but I did keep this. So from looking at it afterwards, what I'm guessing was in my head was that I can bottom this step and like have a ton of disruption. So we're just going to be like either discard and then double discard or just like discard throughout. So we'll be able to resolve. We're likely going to be able to resolve whatever. So as long as we draw a tutor or a depths, I know that's only like a 13 or 14 outer depending on the list. But I kept it. Yeah, I don't know that I would every time, and I think you might be right that often I would ship that hand, but in this particular game I kept it.
Yeah, I don't think I would keep it every time either, but it really just depends on my mood.
Yeah, so pretty clear after Mana Confluence Duress we're in the mirror here. They had the really difficult decision of which 3 of the discard spells to take. So they ended up going with the Inquisition, which is correct, I think, for a variety of reasons. It's the one that doesn't cost life. We can't double up on, say, they have 2 creatures in hand, that kind of stuff. The rest is not great in the mirror. So that's why I kept, because I knew the first draw was going to be crop rotation.
It always is.
So one thing that I think is very important in the mirror for anyone watching this to try and think of on a regular basis is when and when not to put Urborg into play. You open up so many combo options for your opponent when you put Urborg in play. It has a serious drawback in these matches. Like they could easily just go Depths Hexmage on their next turn. Like even if we play a discard spell and strip them of a piece, like if the crop rotation they need or a Hexmage, they could easily just draw one of the pieces and just combo us on turn 2. And one of the trickiest pieces, well, not trickiest, but one of the most notable pieces of these current lists is that there are no Karakas in the main deck. So if your opponent gets to combo, you're just never getting the 2020 off the board. Like you have to be able to get your 2020 and use a serious step to get through it. There's no other way around it at that point. So disruption and lands need to be sequenced in a way to your main way to stop them is Wasteland. So tapping out is dangerous, playing Urborg is dangerous. So with that in mind, we laid on the city. I end up playing Thoughtseize first. Thought process was basically I'm worried about exactly that, like them just having like crop rotation Depths Hexmage or Lotus Petal Depths and then draw the Hexmage, that kind of thing. Just cut their outs off to be able to combo when we're tapped out. So decision here was Scrying versus Hexmage. What do you think?
Interesting. I think either one is pretty defensible.
Yeah, I actually tanked.
I
actually tanked on this decision for a while. Yeah, I think it's very close.
I think I would lean towards taking the Hex Mage personally, um, because like I don't want them to just like draw crop rotation and win next turn. I think Sylvan Scrying requires more setup and better like you can see more of what's coming. So
Yeah, exactly. That's where I ended up as well. Was we just don't want to, like, leaning back to that point from a minute ago. We just don't want to give them a window to get a 20/20 into play if we don't have to. The scrying is actually not really even that dangerous given their current hand. Like, they can't get adepts, or if they get adepts, that's actually very good for us. So they're kind of like limited to Wasteland or Thespian stage, neither of which is really that bad in this spot. We're already holding our own stage, and we already have a crop rotation, so it's kind of like both of those are fairly reasonable to be able to play around in the future. It kind of stinks because it makes our duress a forced mull, but that was going to be the case anyway.
predictable.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really have a choice, so they do get the stage there. It's pretty straightforward. They also played a pedal, so we know what their draw step is. Still full information. So at this point, I actually do play the Urborg. I don't think it actually matters, given that they have the pedal and the spirit guide. The additional mana is unlikely to help them, and even if they do draw like a Sylvan Scrying and get the depths into play, they're still a turn behind, and we weren't going to be able to prevent them from trying to combo with a crop rotation next turn anyway, and we do have our crop rotation for Wasteland in a worst case scenario. So in this case, I didn't think the Urborg gave them much edge. And if they did play Adepts, I would be in favor of that too. So they play Stage Go. Here, pretty easy Stage Go. I mean, we could duress them, but I don't really think hoping the one card they drew is a spell that matters is really gonna do anything. If it was a Sylvan Scrying, I feel like they would have cast it. If it's a crop rotation, they'll cast it in response. So I don't actually think the duress does anything here. I think leaving the stage up gives us more options. So one thing the opponent did on the end step that I think is correct is a lot of people will just flip their stage into another land the first opportunity they get, but that runs the risk of us just making a 20/20 on the spot in response when their resources are tapped down. So I think leaving this stage up and doing nothing on their end was a smart decision. I mean, it could matter if they draw like a needle, but yeah, I kind of like just sitting there and leaving it up. Do you generally agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Yeah, if there's anything else that's striking you as we go, feel free to jump in.
I am thinking about this. Like on turn two when you played the Urborg, like I'm fine with playing the Urborg, but I wonder if I wouldn't have just played the Bog. So I don't think the mana mattered that turn, and I don't think Bog's effect is likely to matter. So just like sequencing it so you can maximize your mana on the following turns of the game.
That's fair. I think what I was thinking of at that time was basically I wanted to have the option to combo as soon as possible. So if they do tap out, we know half their hand already. So if they take an action or two to the point where we have full information, we could technically combo with the Urborg in play. Whereas if it's the Bog, we wouldn't really have that option. So if the second land was Bog, it would be City Bog, and then either Urborg or Stage on turn 3, but not both. So I think the thought was we wouldn't have the ability to combo if the opportunity presented it. So it's kind of like that versus the full use of 4 mana next turn, I guess.
Reasonable. I don't think like the opportunity to combo is likely to happen. So
Yeah,
that's where I'm coming from.
yeah, that's
It's a very small thing.
Yeah, it's a completely fair point. So they top deck the Wasteland, which is a very good draw. So end of turn for the same reasons discussed earlier, I don't really want to activate the stage and give them a window to either combo or to wasteland freely through our disruption. So just elected to untap. So here's the downside of not taking the line that you would have considered with the bog, and that we do not have full access. So I played the Hex Mage here as opposed to keeping the stage up. What do you think about that line?
I don't think I would have. I'm like trying to think. I don't know. Not playing. Because I guess our stage isn't very good with them having Wasteland on board. But let's see. If we play it. I think I would have passed, but I'm pretty okay doing it either way. I tend to like to leave as much mana available as possible when I play, even if it's not relevant. I just feel like it gives my opponent more to think about, so they're more likely to screw up. So for that reason, I probably would have waited. But like, I think that's a play style choice, not necessarily correct or incorrect.
Okay. Yeah, I think the reason that I did it is because the way I look at it is we have one piece of interaction up regardless. So if we choose to copy the stage, that's the only thing we can do. If we choose to stifle, it's the only thing we can do. If we choose to crop rotation, it's the only thing we can do. Unless we're doing something like crazy, like crop rotting into a blue source to stifle, but that's not going to happen. Yeah, so we basically get to take one action, all of which we can still take if the Hex Mage is in play. Like, if they're able to combo, we're not going to be able to do anything with our stage because they have the Wasteland. So if they get Adepts into play and they combo and we try to copy their Adepts, they just Wasteland our stage. So my thought process was that that's kind of a dead line. It takes the bluff of Elvish Spirit Guide off the table. So to your point, that could give them less to think about. But what I was angling for is next turn, we do have the option to combo through their Wasteland if we have both Stage and Hex Mage out. So if we draw any colored source of mana, we would have the crop rotation for the Depths, the double combo to get through their Wasteland, and the Stifle to stop anything else they could do, like if they tried to combo, and that might be enough to win. So that was where I was, but yeah, the downside of that is we're giving them less to think about, and we're kind of telling them we don't have an Elvish Spirit Guide.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the opponent's draw is their own Hex Mage. We do not draw the colored source, so we know their hand. We know it's Spirit Guide step. I don't think there's any reason to play a discard spell. We can hold up both stage and one of our pieces of interaction. So I think it's totally fine to just pass back in this spot. So direct draw from the opponent was very good. What do you think about what we should do in this spot?
Let's see. They have Step and Spirit Guide. So I would. Aren't they just dead if we crop rotation? Did I just like miss something? If we crop rotation. Oh no, because we don't have the Step though.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's like really awkward. Why don't we have another colored source?
Exactly.
I really hate the thought of just letting this resolve without casting crop rotation, but I'm like struggling to think of what I would actually want to get.
Yeah. part of the issue is like neither of these cards do something on their own, so they'll obviously take the crop rotation if it resolves, and then the stifle doesn't really do anything. So like it either if they have a way to if they find a way to get depths, the stifle is just buys a turn, and we can already, if we get depths with the crop rotation, we can already combo through their wasteland, so it's not really doing a whole lot. The upside is like if we happen to draw another way to find a depths, we could if we force them to take the crop rotation, leaving stifle, it gives us an out to their step. So if we end up in a lodge on lodge battle and we can stifle their step, maybe we win, but that seems ambitious and requires specific top decks to get us to that point. So what I ended up doing is just going and getting the depths now and letting them take the stifle, as awkward as that is. I felt that was the closer line to actually winning the game, and with them actually having the step in their hand, the longer we give them to find depths, the more likely we are to lose the game.
Makes sense. Seems reasonable.
Yeah, the step is such a bad card in so many spots, but in the mirror in their hand, it's actually really it's a really threatening card. So I floated one black and decided to get rid of the bog instead of any of the other lands. Didn't get Wasteland here because Wasteland doesn't actually do anything against their board. If we Wasteland their stage, they still have the Hex Mage to combo. If we Wasteland their Wasteland, that's kind of pointless too. So yeah. So they take the stifle. So it's getting to the point where we have additional mana. No reason to not cut them off of the Spirit Guide. You never know when the beatdown play could come into focus. Anything that they draw, they're just going to be casting anyway. So there's really no reason to. So unfortunately, they do find the tutor. And at this point, we're kind of into hope and pray mode. We can't stop them from comboing. So in this spot, I just put the 20/20 into play, praying to top deck the tutor. Don't think there was any other real line to consider. So, pretty heads up play by the opponent here. Instead of choosing to fight over our depths, they went after the City of Brass instead. They recognized that our out to win the game in this situation is to play our own Sujiri step. So they tried to cut us off of the source for a Sylvan Scrying or a crop rotation instead of making us use a stage. Unfortunately, we do have 3 mana left over, so we just get to copy a mana complements at the end of their turn. It's something to always be aware of, to fix your mana off of their mana if it comes to it. So the Elvish Spirit Guide was not the green card we were looking for.
Yeah, that one's not good enough.
Gave it the old college try and swung on the off chance the opponent was scared to block. They were not. So they take game 1. So I'm going to test your depths knowledge and ask you how you feel about this hand.
Uh-oh. I mean, I like this hand.
Yeah, I didn't think that would be particularly. I mean, it obviously doesn't have like the ideal like proactive disruption clear out a potential crop rotation hand, but we are going to be able to counter their first spell. And if that happens to be a crop rotation, that would be amazing. Yeah, there's no way this hand ever
Turn 2 Merit Age, protection,
Yeah.
and a stat to get you through.
And the stage for turn 3, so if we're worried about a wasteland, we don't even have to. If they happen to have the wasteland, we can just play through it on turn 3. I think this is an easy Urborg Petal go. So here's my obligatory joke for the video. We could counter this Once Upon a Time, but gonna save this for a much better spell. So,
wow.
Let that one resolve. That's a snap resolve.
To be fair, I generally don't think it's correct for people to counter Once Upon a Time, and it happens all the time.
Yeah,
whenever somebody bases my Once Upon a Time, I'm just like, I'm so ahead right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more or less joking. That's like a joke, but obviously, in that spot, you'd want to consider what they could actually get off of it. So with our hand actually beating Wasteland doesn't matter. If it's a combo piece, that doesn't likely matter, because if we get into dueling Lodge situation, we have the step to go right through it. The only problem card that they could actually find off of it is exactly Caracas, and that's pretty low odds that they would hit exactly that off the Once Upon a Time, so I don't think it's worth countering based, or even considering countering based on the setup of our hand. So this is a pretty easy Flusterstorm. Somewhat unfortunate, because would have liked to have saved that for a tutor, but can't let them take the turn 2. So what are your thoughts on going versus waiting in this spot?
I personally like waiting, but I totally see doing it either way.
Yeah, I think it's close if we don't have the step, but since we have the step and don't care about Wasteland at all, I think it's fine to wait, and then we get to see if their land drop is a Wasteland, and then we get to see if their land drop is a Caracas and not get blown out. If it is, we're still playing the game of Magic. We can't beat crop rotation either way, so going in front of a green source crop rotation doesn't matter. So I think it's correct to wait in that spot. And we have the steps, so them being able to combo also doesn't matter. So,
prediction, without having seen this game, they have that with a Spirit Guide.
They absolutely do have an Elvish Spirit Guide, but luckily it's not with the crop rotation.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the one thing that you would have to consider, but our hand actually just doesn't do anything else, so there's no sense in playing around it. Like, it would be one thing if we had a discard spell and we could wait a turn or two to try and clear out their hand, or had a Safekeeper so that we could set up double combo, plus a way to protect against Caracas, but we literally have nothing else going on. So I'm not going to play around Spirit Guide crop rotation in this spot.
Oh yeah, no, I would absolutely go for it also. I was like, I have a feeling they're going to make their own, which doesn't matter because of step.
Yeah, but. So that is exactly what happens. And when making that decision on turn 2, the other downside about doing that main phase in the face of just their Urborg is you're asking to lose to like a piece of acceleration plus scrying too, which they might not necessarily do versus what they did here. Like, they could have easily had like Lotus Petal scrying too and elected to try and go with the cheeky stage play instead. So I think you're playing into too much, but yeah, we didn't have to worry about this particular
beautiful board state.
It is a beautiful board state. It's very symmetrical. You know what? I should have tapped this before attacking just to make it look better. Missed opportunity. So pretty lucky. Hand was pretty gross there. Oh, that reminds me. We didn't do that. How do you generally sideboard for the mirror?
So I tend to shave down on my dark depths, but I'm coming from like so much playing slow depths where you have more control over things. I don't shave as many out of this list as I did out of there. but I tend to play the long game and just like try to make sure I have every axis covered before I combo. And I found that's worked pretty well for me. I mean, obviously, sometimes you just like do what we did there and kill them on turn two, but I tend to go for longer games. And then, yeah, that's my general plan.
Yeah, that's fair enough. What I do is generally shave adepts, but I also like exchanging not of this worlds for Sylvan Safekeepers. I think Safekeepers just come down under the discard a lot of times, and discard is so bad going along in these matches that you just don't want cards sitting in your hand that they can take. So I think Not of This World is like actively bad, and Safekeeper just does that role better. There's only 2 decays in the entire 75, so it's very unlikely to die. If they want to needle that instead of a combo piece or Wasteland or Caracas, that's fine. So I just think it's a better card, so I swap those. I also shave a little bit of acceleration and a discard spell and bring in all the Flusterstorms. I think the Flusterstorms are really good in this match. They hit all the discard. On the play, they're insane. They hit all the discard. They're often in spots where you can prevent them from comboing or counter crop rotation or Sylvan Scrying, and yeah, they're just good. And sometimes these matchups are even about Stifle now, which is kind of crazy, but I just think the Flusterstorms carry a weight. So
yeah. I bring in my Flusters and the Safekeepers also for the same reason.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the general setup, is in with the Safekeepers and Flusters, and out with a little bit of acceleration and Adepts and some discard, and then Out of This World. So what do you think of this opener in Game 3?
It's pretty mediocre.
Yep. That's where I was. No real plan, kind of glacial. The needles aren't really great. So, more of a fan of the 6?
I like it more. It's not my favorite. It's just like, I really wish we had a second colored mana source here.
Yeah.
Like the double Thespian stage is kind of meh.
Yeah, I mean, the Thespian stages are really good in the matchup, so it's not the end of the world. And depending on how the game shakes out, we're going to be able to copy 5-color lands. So the way I look at it is like that kind of, the second stage kind of is the second 5-color land, or it's a wasteland, or it's whatever. And I think any hand in the mirror that has 2 crop, it doesn't even matter. If I have a green source and 2 crop rotations, I don't care what the other 4 cards are. Like, the crop rotations are so good that I'll live with it, because technically we could turn the stage into any land we want anyway, if it really comes to it. Not just with the copy thing, but if we crop rotate it. So I ended up keeping this and bottoming the card that we're very unlikely to cast anytime soon in the Hex Mage. I think you could make an argument it's a discard spell, but I like getting information when possible.
Yeah, I love having a discard spell.
Yeah.
For turn 1 in the mirror.
So I tried to make the very complex play of lightning bolting myself, but the opponent was not willing to let me do that. They fought over the shock, so they were able to win that battle. So pretty standard turn 2, 1 combo piece, go get the other combo piece from the opponent. So, because you requested it, we drew the second rainbow source. In this spot, life very, very, very rarely matters in these matches. So preserve the gemstone counters and take the additional shot.
Have you had any of these mirrors come down to damage?
Yeah, actually. Like, it used to be a lot more common in the turbo mirror. Because there was 4 needles on both sides and nobody would board any out, so you're literally working on 8 needle effects, and a lot of games would come down to like legitimately slow thawing depths or beatdown, and it was often like literally the third needle would have to name Dark Depths to stop the slow thaw, because somebody would name Sage and somebody would name Depths, or would name Hexmage, and then whoever was ahead on Depths had to find, yeah, you could normally like get through the first one because it's obviously 30 mana and there's like Ghost Quarter in the deck at the time. So, you know, it's very unlikely that you're going to get the first one. So by the time the second one, whoever's ahead on mana gets the second one close to being thawed out, someone's going to have found, like that other player's going to have found the other needle. So you'd get in these spots where it was kind of like whoever drew more First Strikers or Reclaimer. So Reclaimer would just allow your other dorks to win because they couldn't block, because Reclaimer would just Sajiri step and protect one of the creatures, and then you'd get the onboard advantage. Or if you had more First Strikers, you could just brick wall the other team until you were ready to start attacking. Like, it was literally a game of limited, where Sajiri step was the most important card after Reclaimer. But yeah, many the turbo mirrors were very long, drawn-out affairs. I mean, you've played against Green Post. Imagine if instead of 4 needles, there were 8.
Yeah. So in slow mirrors, I've had it come down to like attacking with creatures other than Lage. I don't think I've had that out of Turbo or Rainbow yet.
Yeah, Rainbow's a little bit harder because there are more ways. Oh, there are less needles. One, so it's less likely that the combo is going to be locked out. One person's just likely to be able to, even through 2 needles. And the second is, like, there's less creatures, so I'm actively boarding out creatures post-board. I don't think the Elvish Spirit Guides are particularly amazing, so that's the acceleration I trim. I want to keep it used to be the opposite. You would leave the Spirit Guides in because they were creatures too, so that you could play that game in the Turbo Mirror, but now the blue mana is actually so important because some of the best cards in the mirror are the Stifles, and the Flusterstorms are good too. So you actively want your 13 blue sources, so you can't cut the petals instead of the creatures now. So now you're cutting the creatures, which makes it really unlikely. Like, a single Hexmage brick walls every creature in the deck besides Hexmage and Reclaimer, which means unless you draw more Hexmages, you can never really attack. Like, the Spirit Guides just aren't going to get there. But yeah, luckily Turbo has transformed into a more elegant stack battle oriented thing as opposed to 2/2 and 2/1 creature combat. So for their third turn, they have the Depths here. So they're threatening Crop Rotation and/or Spirit Guide, which means no attack from our side, because suiciding the Safekeeper, if they kept something like Not of This World to protect against the Caracas, isn't my idea of fun. And the 1 damage just does not matter. So I feel like this is a pretty easy stage pass. So if opponent had it, they decided to not go for it, which I think is wise in the face of a Safekeeper on the other side. Okay, so Caracas is a much less valuable Magic card in this particular setup. So they pass it back. You could double Crop Rot and go for it here, or tap out and go for it here. I don't like that idea, just because if they have an Elvish Spirit Guide, they get to make Lodge with protection from Caracas, and we could just lose the game on the spot. If they have a tutor too. How do you feel about going versus waiting here?
I would wait a turn.
Yeah. Agreed. So here I think we have a lot of different options. How do you feel about playing the Depths to preserve tutors versus playing something like Urborg or Stage to maximize other effects?
I don't think I like playing the Urborg here. I think I don't like the symmetrical effect there. I think I like just playing the depths personally.
Yeah, that's where I ended up with. I thought it was close between the depths and the stage. Um, but I like having, like, if shit hits the fan and everything goes wrong and they somehow manage to force through their 2020, I like the idea that we aren't reliant on their dark depths to do the same. And if they do somehow tap out to go for it, we can also go for it and be in a much better spot. So they do go for it here. How do you think we should respond to this?
I think I would just likely crop rotation for the wasteland, um, and break up, and then I might crop rotation for our own Urborg and make ours too. The chances of them having the second spirit guide plus the crop rotation here are so bad.
Yeah, so the spot I ended up on is, I definitely agree with the first part of that. Like, I think we 100% stop them from comboing with the wasteland. The issue is, for us to combo, we have to use the second crop rotation, and we have to get Urborg to do it. So once we do that, we can't get rid of our Urborg from that. I guess we could. I guess we could Safekeeper it. But yeah, they were only one card away unless we decide to proactively Safekeeper our Urborg off the table. So the downsides are, if we leave the Urborg, they're literally a Depths or a crop rotation plus land drop away from just comboing us. If we sack the Urborg to leave them with just Stage Confluence, we have no land to protect our 2020.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, this happening on our turn. If it was at the end of their turn, I think that would be obviously different for a variety of reasons. But yeah, we would have to Armageddon ourselves to not give them an Urborg. And once they have Urborg, they're very close to comboing again right behind it. And at that point, we would have used both of our tutors, so we can't get through their Lodge.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, I think it's close. I just think it's, it's one of those things where we could lose if that happened. So ended up going with the Lotus Petal go. So it's kind of a nutty draw, for similar reasons what we discussed. Decided not to play the Urborg. So a few draw go hands here. End of their turn. Tried to make a second copy of Go for the Depths, so they copy our Depths in response, which is totally fine at this point. So I took a interesting path here. Would you go for it in this spot?
I mean, yeah.
Exactly. I thought about this one for a while before I made a decision. So I'll give you a second to digest the possibilities here.
I'm pretty sure I would still go for it.
Okay, so the reason that I didn't, which you could definitely argue is playing scared, is if they have a crop rotation or a stifle, I likely lose the game, was my thought process. Or we have to get into this spot where I try to run them out of lands with Caracas. Those are the options. The interaction that causes the issue. Obviously, they could just stifle the step. That's straightforward. But the crop rotation issue is if they crop rotation for Caracas in response to the Shijiri step trigger going on the stack, we're forced to give our 2020 Shroud, which will then fizzle the step activation, and then we actually have no legitimate way to make our 2020 unblockable, and we're in a spot where we have to land pod race them essentially and run them out of lands before they run us out of lands in a Caracas war. So I felt like having the ability to start that fight anyway with the Caracas at the time of our choosing and beat their Wasteland if they have one, and beat Stifle eventually if they have one. It was worth it to go long in this spot because I didn't see how they could actually get through double crop rotation on our side. Like, if they ever try to kill us with the step, they would need to have double discard spell in front of a tutor for the step to actually make this work, and an answer to the Caracas, because in response to one of the discard spells, we would just rotate. So I felt like it was just basically hard to lose going a couple of extra turns here. But if we rotate it now for step and they did have one of those cards, it's possible that they could get out of it. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's where I ended up.
I'm definitely the more aggressive player between the two of us, so like, I don't know. I think I would just go for it. Never scared.
Duly noted. So I end up going forward, and for what it's worth, by the end of this, we will find out if that would have worked. And you know, you'll probably feel better when that comes to light. So a couple of turns of passing there. I could have, at the end of their 6th turn, crop rotted for Caracas. The reason I didn't is because I didn't want to give them a window to have something corner case, like Not of This World or Stifle. And some people do not board out Not of This World in the mirror. I've run into it many times. So if they stopped the first Caracas activation and then went and got a Wasteland, that would get rid of our Caracas and kind of cut that angle off. Whereas waiting a turn and playing a 4th land drop gives us the ability to both get Caracas and, if they try and get rid of it, copy it with stage. So Fluster Storm's a really good draw because we can theoretically stack spells if we draw another colored source of mana, to the point where even if they do have a tutor or a stifle, we'll be able to counter it based on their current mana situation. So they play a Needle here. I think the name... Well, I mean, what would you, if you were... I know we don't know their hand at this point, but what would you think some good Needle targets for the opponent would be here?
I think they're just holding 3 lands, honestly. So I think they're probably going to name Caracas.
Yeah, that's what I think too, but that is not what they end up doing. I'm not sure they know the Safekeeper interaction, so it was one of the reasons I thought that this would be a good game to cover, is just because this is something that will come up and something that people should be aware of. So they name Stage, which does cut off the line of protecting our utility Caracas, and they just naturally had the step. So this is kind of like where the safekeeper just gets the safekeeper has a very real drawback in the matchup. So they're forced to give it Shroud, which shuts off the step ability and locks them out. So any colored source would have worked. The Spirit Guide is nice. So in this spot, we just get to do everything. We get to crop rotation for the step, give Lodge Pro black, and if they have a Stifle or a crop rotation, we just get to Flusterstorm it, and they don't have enough mana to pay, barring their hand being exactly Spirit Guide plus Stifle or Spirit Guide plus crop rotation. So that is what we end up doing. And the very esteemed and wise Michael Mapson's read was correct in that the opponent did not have any of the cards I was playing around.
So, they never have it.
So the earlier approach of aggression would have also got there. So yeah, I think there's definitely a couple of different ways you could approach that, and it's definitely a play style thing. I like the boa constrictor style at times, and that's absolutely gotten me into situations where I probably should have won games and ended up losing, and it's probably got me into spots where I ended up winning games I would have lost. I don't know whether I'm ahead or behind on that calculation, but just two different approaches, and always good to get different thoughts from very skilled pilots on how they would have approached it. So anything else strike you going through the last couple of games?
Not really.
Okay. Thoughts on...
disappointed we didn't see more Once Upon a Times.
We did. I got to get the Once Upon a Time joke in. It got a Sajiri step that they died with in their hands.
So I wanted to see it every game.
You wanted to see it every game, huh? I mean, contrary to public opinion on this matter, because I've heard it said numerous times, you don't get to start every game with it in your opening hand. More evidence, 2 out of 3 games here was not in their opening hand, and I believe the math would kind of like coincide with that. So I don't know what hex you have on Moto's programming where you get to start with it in your opening hand every time, but it doesn't work for the rest of us. Or maybe it works in a way that we see it even significantly less than you do to make up for the amount of times it's in your opener.
It's got to be it.
That's the only way to make the math work. So given that the card loves you, it's like the Dark Confidant or the Expedition map of Rainbow Depths. Certain cards love certain people, and you and Once Upon a Time have a symbiotic relationship that that I haven't been able to crack the code yet. I'm willing to give it another try, so I'm gonna text Once Upon a Time later and see if they're willing to go through another league or two with me despite all the bad mouthing. See if we can repair this relationship. On that note, you have anything coming up that you wanted to just have out there for people to check out? Or I know you have the Depths podcast that you guys do regularly, which is the Dark Depths podcast. Is there anything else? Do you plan on streaming anytime soon?
That depends on if my laptop wants to cooperate. The last couple times I went to stream, it just like dropped all the frames, and I'm very bad with technology, so I couldn't figure it out. But next week there's a half Legacy, half Modern PTQ. It's actually on Sunday, so I will likely be streaming that. Also, if you're watching this video right when it comes out, Tom and I were both just in the last This Week in Legacy article on MTG Goldfish. People should check that out.
Yeah, that is I couldn't believe how long that article was. yesterday when I looked
Oh,
through it. Because I kept expecting it to end. I was like, okay, this is a really long, really long. But yeah, I guess like a lot of us wrote some of this stuff, so that makes sense. But then he did like his own entire section of like 10, like he did a 10 decks to review, or 10 decks of the year type of thing. Like no specific order. I know a lot of people complained on Reddit because people like to complain, but he did like 10 decks of the year, and a bunch of people mentioned some decks that they thought should have been on there or thought they shouldn't have been on there, yada yada. And he did like another 10 this week. So I got through all of that, and I was like, man, he put a lot of work into this, and then he went through like 3 events after that. It's like challenge, and like maybe the Octagon. I forget what the third event was, but
yeah, it was locked down, I think.
yeah, I was like, holy crap, man! I can't even imagine how much work and editing went into that article. I felt like almost like putting it through like a word counter. I was like, I hope they pay him by the word.
Well, like when I finished writing my part, I noticed that the document was at like 15 pages, and that was like before Joe had even added anything.
Yeah, and then he did the entire 10 decks, 10 additional decks of the year, and then 3 event coverages, and then like decks he's playing of the week too. Like it was an insanely long article. Like mad credit to to him. That is a work of love. So yeah, people should definitely check that out. You will not feel like you have a lack of legacy content after reading that article. So what's amazing is this is a little over an hour, and we somehow managed to get through the entire thing with all 4 dogs not really making a crazy appearance. Like mine are starting to whine a little bit. They're about ready to go run in the snow. But yeah, we got through it. So thanks to the dogs too. All right. Well, thanks again for doing this, and I'll catch everyone again later.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.